Hi, this is Michael on U2 Guitar Tutorials on YouTube. This is an update and correction to a previous tutorial I did where I attempted to explain the time signature change in Where the Streets Have No Name. Now I got some of it right. I did get the time at which the time signature changes to 4/4 time. But thanks to Tony on the U2 Guitar Tutorials group on Google's group, Tony reached out to me and said, hey, I think since I did say in my video I wasn't 100% sure how this works and I'm not an expert in music theory, Tony got back to me and said, or emailed me and said, hey, I think I've taken music theory, I can explain to you what's happening, and I think he's right here. So this was a great clarification, and I am in turn going to do an updated tutorial here on it. What we need to remember here is in the first basic part of a time signature or underlying part of a time signature is the beats per minute. So we have Where the Streets Have No Name is at 127 beats per minute. Let's just review some of this real quick. If you have 127 beats per minute, then what happens is each quarter note is 472 milliseconds. And you can do the calculations in your calculator or on the web in a delay time calculator, but every single quarter note is 472 milliseconds. Every eighth note, okay, so what's the eighth note calculation? Eighth note is half that, 236 milliseconds. So when we play the basic riff of Where the Streets Have No Name, when you play the basic riff, you should be playing that at the BPM, the beats per minute, of 127 beats per minute, which is every time you pick the string, you're going to be playing a note, an eighth note, 236 milliseconds apart, because we just said an eighth note is 236 milliseconds. So here's the tempo. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I'm watching my tempo light. Every one, when I say the word 1 and say 2, 1 and 2, the space between 1 and 2 was 472 milliseconds. The space between 1 and 2 and 2 and is 236 milliseconds. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's what's happening with my tempo light. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So keep in mind, when I play these notes, if you're playing to tempo, each of those notes is 236 milliseconds apart. It'll be clear why I'm going through this in a minute, because I want to try to relate this to the time signatures. Now, in the beginning of the song, no matter what this time signature is, and we're going to talk about it being 3/4, but 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Those are all eighth notes, and they're all 236 milliseconds apart. Now let's go, and we'll derive and explain how we get there, but let's assume that the next part, this part, is a different time signature, and it is. It's going to be, as Tony explained to me, he believes it's 6/8. So we've gone from 3/4 to 6/8. Now, why is this 6/8? And what I want to explain is we might be in a different time signature, but every one of these notes is still played within the same beats per minute, meaning every one of those eighth notes is still 236 milliseconds. So the quarter note, the space between a quarter note of 472 milliseconds and the space between an eighth note, half that, 236 milliseconds, has not changed when the time signature changes. I wanted to make this more clear. So when you go, we just played all eighth notes for that entire riff, but that was two different time signatures. Then we're going to go into some strumming, and it's going to go into 4/4 time. But I just wanted to make that clear that the quarter note and the eighth note, the spacing between those notes throughout the entire song is always the same. It's just a matter of how you change up the rhythm and the meter and the emphasis of the notes within each riff. So let's now go through this from the top. We all know that we've gone through it in the previous tutorials. We all know that we've got, if we play it on tempo, 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and. Now the reason our friend Tony is saying that that's 3/4 is because it's 1 and 2 and 3 and the riff is just 6 notes. Then it repeats itself. And the emphasis is on that E. I know there are some people out there that would argue this is 6/4. One of those reasons, as I previously explained in a tutorial, I thought it was 6/4 because the cymbal crash is going off every time you play this riff twice. We went through it in the previous tutorial. And the cymbal went crash, 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and crash and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and crash. So you could say that in 3/4 you could say a measure is this. 6 notes, 8 notes. So 3/4 means there are 3 quarter note beats, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's a measure. Each one is a measure, 1, 2, 3. There just happens to be playing 8 notes, so it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. That's 3/4. You could put 2 of them together and say that there are actually 6 quarter note beats, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and. Now, this is where this is not Tony speaking now. My theory is if it was 6, if you did something 6/4, maybe there would be more emphasis every time you hit the 1. So you'd have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and. So see, the emphasis is on that first note. So what I like about calling this 3/4 is it tells you that where the emphasis note is. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and 2, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. And the pattern of this seems to fit. But again, you're playing 8th notes. 2 8th notes is a quarter note, so you have 3 quarter notes in that measure. Let's just assume that that's correct. People can, everyone, we can debate over it, but in general, we've got, let's just say right now that we've got 3/4 time. Playing 6 8th notes. Now, when you transfer from and go to this, now you've gone from da 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 to da 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 to da 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 da. Different rhythm, different meter, still 8th notes. But this is why, as Tony was explaining to me, you're moving now to 6 8. So in general, 3/4 was 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. But what is the rhythm or meter here of 6 8? It's 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. There is that rhythm, that emphasis is different on the different notes. It's 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So you get 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So when you do 1 and 2 and, that is 6 notes, 6 8 notes. 1 and 2 and. But be careful, it's 6 8, but 1 and 2 and is 6 notes. 6 8 notes is again 3 quarter note beats. But we call it 6 8 because of the emphasis, because we're trying to say 1 and 2 and. So you can hear how the emphasis is different. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and apparently they call that 6 8 because within a measure you'll have the 6 8 notes that you're playing. So again, I still might not have this personally 100% right, but that clarification for Tony was very helpful. There is another, whether we agree on 3/4, 6/4, or 6/8, or maybe even 12/8, whatever it is, there is a time signature change here from this main riff to this. That's the second time signature change to this. And that's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, hopefully that's a better explanation. Now let's listen to the song and see if we can point out where is the 3/4, the 6/8, and the 4/4, and see if we can piece all this together. So let's play this transition part. I'm not going to say anything, I'm not going to count through it, I'm just going to listen to it again. Now what's interesting here is when they went to the, what we'll call 6/8, this part, there were two cymbal crashes. There was a cymbal crash on the first note, crash, and then right here, crash. So that divided that up into two 6/8 measures. That's 6/8 notes. And he crashed right before that. Then he crashed again right here, crash. If you listen for that, the cymbal crash there, I think, divided that up into those 12 notes, into 6/8 notes and 6/8 notes. So it might make sense that that is again 6/8. So, but you think of it as, so 1 and a, 2 and a, 1 and a, 2 and a, and it's 1 and a, 2 and a, and then he hit the crash again, 1 and a, 2 and a. So crash and a, 2 and a, crash and a, 2 and a. Listen for that here. So those two cymbal crashes broke those two measures of 6/8. So it went from 3/4, 6/8, and then da 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 was essentially he started hitting 1, 2, 3, 4, and you heard the 4/4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this one more time, and I'm going to edit into the video. I'm going to use some animation to try to show 1 and 2 and for each of the riffs. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. I'm going to do those, and then we're going to do the 6/8, 1 and a, 2 and a, 1 and a, 2 and then we'll do the 4. So let me see if I can do that. Hopefully it'll work. I'm going to play the song right now, and then I'll take that video and I'll try to sync it up to some animation and put this in a more visual format. And I think I'll be the first to ever try to do that. Let's see what happens. So I was putting my finger down here on the cymbal crashes, but you can, at the beginning, you can think of it as 3/4. I think that is actually easier. Whether it's right or not, I agree with Tony on that one, because that's the way I think of the riff. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3, and in every two of those measures you're hearing the cymbal crash. And then there is a small transition where instead of doing it every 2 of those measures, you hear Larry Mullen Jr. actually do 1 and 2 and 3 and he puts a crash in there. So crash and 2 and 3 and then instead of waiting a second measure, he does crash and 2 and 3 and again. And that is the signal that you're going into the 6/8. So let me explain it this way. I'm going to put my finger down here just like when I played the last video. Okay, so here we go. Crash and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and crash and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and crash and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Then instead of doing that crash every 2 measures, all of a sudden he then does this. I'm going to repeat it. Crash and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and then he does this. Crash and 2 and 3 and crash and 2 and 3 and. So he does a crash on each measure, and then he does crash and 2 and crash and 2 and for the 6/8. There, I think I summarized it right. So that's what's happening. That is how you look at this riff. And then after he did crash and 2 and crash and 2 and he went boom, 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 boom for the strumming transition. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that wonderful strumming riff. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you actually think when Edge does this, or I think of that as 1, 2, 3, 4, and then he goes, and I think of that as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. But it's all from that moment. It's 4/4 time. Okay, I've completely spent way too much time on this. I've overdone it, I know, as I usually do, but that's just what I do. I enjoy trying to learn this stuff, and I enjoy attempting to explain it. But I got to give Tony a lot of credit for correcting me and contributing to all of our knowledge on this one, so I don't take credit for this. I am learning through this stuff like everybody else, but I find it very interesting, the time signature changes on this song. So that should be a much clearer version of the time signature change. Let's move on to the rest of the tutorials for this update of Where the Streets Have No Name. Thanks for watching.